My guest today is the founder of Oliver Bonas, Olly Tress.
All my contemporaries have done the normal thing and got proper jobs. Yeah. I haven't often think about that, but when I do, I think that's quite odd.
Starting out by selling gifts from Hong Kong to his friends, Olly has built an iconic British business with unique style and 90 stores in the UK.
That, it turns out, is difficult.
What was so... I completely agree, but what was so difficult about it?
Well, because if you don't tell someone exactly what you want and how to do it...
In this episode, Olly shares his battle with perfectionism and tips on letting it go, how he curated a consistent store experience, and the complications of having so many product categories.
I'm not very easy to work with, as you well know. Conne and I's first meeting, I was half an hour late.
Welcome to Unboxed. I'm your host, Conne Nam, the founder of Astrid and Miyu. In these conversations, I speak to founders, investors, and creators who are all breaking boundaries in their space to discover the person behind the brand and what it took for them to build their empires. Hello, Unboxed listeners. Today's episode is powered by Payhawk, and we at Astrid and Miyu are excited to share how they've transformed our financial operations. Remember when our finance team was constantly buried under a mountain of receipts and expense reports? Those days are long gone, thanks to Payhawk. Now our finance team have evolved from receipt chasers to strategic powerhouses. Payhawk's innovative spend management platform has liberated our finance team from mundane, repetitive tasks. No more endless hours spent chasing down missing receipts or matching expenses within zero. With Payhawk handling day-to-day finance tasks, our team now has the time and mental space to dive deep into financial analysis, forecasting, and strategic planning. They're not just number crunchers anymore. They're key players in shaping Astrid and Miyu's future. But it's not just about our finance team. Payhawk has introduced us to what they call a healthy spend culture. Every employee knows exactly how, where, and what they can spend on. It's all pre-approved and crystal clear. This means less time worrying about expenses and more time focusing on what really matters, growing our business and serving our customers. Curious to see how Payhawk could elevate your finance team and streamline your operations? There's a link in our show notes where you can book a demo. Don't forget to mention you heard about them on the Unbox podcast. We're incredibly grateful to Payhawk for supporting both our show and Astrid and Miyu's growth journey. Hi, Olly.
Hi, Connie. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming. Welcome to the studio. Welcome to Unbox. I've been wanting to have you for ages as a fan of your brand and yourself as well. And my kids absolutely love Oliver Bonas.
Well, that was sweet. You sent me that brilliant picture of your daughter.
Yeah, they're obsessed.
Oh, fantastic.
So tell our listeners about yourself. And I also don't know much about your, I guess, like life before Oliver Bonas and
well, that feels like a long time ago, actually, because my life before Oliver Bonas is shorter than my life since I started, actually. Now when I think about it. So one of my, I suppose, my distinguishing sort of characteristics of my upbringing was that my parents lived overseas. So we used to travel every 2 or 3 years. We'd move from one country to another.
Oh, so did you grow up in different countries?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I did. So, I was born... Well, I wasn't actually born in Sudan, but my parents were living in Sudan when I was born. And so I spent my first year in Sudan, and then I moved to Nigeria, then I moved to New York, then I moved to London, then to Hong Kong, and so on. So we moved around to a lot of different countries. And so that's quite a distinctive element to my upbringing. And I went to, but I was at school in the UK all that time, and I went to university in England, and I left university in 1989, and it was at that point that my parents had been living in Hong Kong, and so I'd started, didn't really think of it as a business, it was just a sort of way of making money, was importing bags and watches from Hong Kong and selling them to friends. So that was just my little mini entrepreneurial start in life.
And is that the start of Oliver Bonas?
Well, in a way it was. It's obviously, it pivoted a bit from that. But for the first few years after leaving university, I suppose I was just finding my feet and working out what I might do. actually, it's probably a bit generous. I wasn't really doing that. I was I was a bit distracted by a girlfriend at the time, and then she did me a favor by calling time, and then I then got a bit more focused. I'm ambitious. I really want to do something. I'm very interested in design. I'm interested in retail, and so how do I actually then fulfill my sort of ambitions? And that's when I sort of started thinking about how I would take this very small enterprise and turn it into something that actually had some substance and had some potential for growth. So that was that was post university. That was sort of 2 or 3 year process of slightly sort of realizing that time was passing.
So when did it get morphed into what Oliver Bonas is now?
Well, the original store opened in 1993, sort of autumn of 1993. So up to that point, the prior 6 months, I was just sort of planning it, working it out. As people who've started businesses in recessions will know, there are quite a lot of advantages to starting a business then. A lot of things are cheap. There's a lot of access to things that sometimes, when everything's thriving, whether it's property, it's harder to actually access. So I was able to start the business on a shoestring. But to say I was naive and didn't know what I was doing.
How old were you at this point?
So at that point, I was 24, something like that.
And you hadn't had a full-time, like you don't have any experience working for someone else?
No. All my contemporaries have done the normal thing and got proper jobs. Yeah. And I didn't. And actually, I haven't often think about that, but when I do, I think that's quite odd to not even.
How did you find that courage, you think?
Well, you put it in terms of courage, but that's not how it felt. I think it was that sort of combination of naivety and inexperience and overconfidence that what could be so hard, and I'll find my way and I'll do something. But perhaps it's more, my personality, type. I was diagnosed recently as ADHD, and I'm sure that's played into it. I don't think I'd make a good employee. And I did go for one job interview. I did actually go for one interview with one of these sort of blue chip companies, and I think within 10 minutes we kind of worked out that I wasn't going to take a job. They weren't going to be offering me one, and
it's a blessing.
And that was kind of the deal. And so we said, "Nice to meet you," and parted ways. And I didn't do any more job interviews actually after that. I can't. It was that long ago, I'm afraid, Connie.
Yeah, and you also talk about moving around a lot as a kid, and I'm the same. Very similar. I moved back and forth between Korea and the US, and I think that kind of gave me, I always felt like an outsider, but I think it also allowed me to think very independently, and that's been a good foundation for starting a business, being an entrepreneur. Do you think that was the case for you as well?
Well, it's possible. I hadn't thought of it in those terms. When I think about it, I was exposed to a lot of different, for want of a better word, culture / aesthetics that go along with different cultures. And I think innately there's something in my brain that is interested in all the aspects that go into a sort of, I suppose, a consumer-facing brand. So whether it's sort of a restaurant or a bar or a retail, which is where I ended up, I have a view on it, and it probably is informed. Must be informed by my this style of upbringing, but also my family. My mother was artistic, and my dad, although he worked for a bank, he wasn't your average bank. He was a lot more, very sort of a lot of personality. So I think you mix it all up.
Yeah.
And for some reason, there was one other thing. I think I really had this idea that if you got a job, there was a sort of ceiling on what you could achieve, whether that was financial or just in terms of sort of self-fulfillment, and you're at the end of the day at the behest of someone else. So I think that was pretty important for me. Without-
And you realized this at such an early age.
Yeah, I did. I think the possibility of sort of limitless possibility felt really, well, anything else felt like why would you have limited possibility when you've got unlimited possibility? And so for me, maybe it was that binary. It's like, well, why would I do that when I could do that? And I suppose I had this, one might say, misplaced sense of what could be so hard.
A lot of confidence.
Yeah, I mean, it turns out it was very hard, and then it was really in many ways misplaced because it was, it's been a long journey. But yeah, maybe that's how it was. It just felt quite binary, and that I wouldn't possibly choose limited possibility when I could have unlimited.
And where did you open your first store? And how long did you run that for before opening your second?
Yeah, that was in Parsons Green in London.
Is it still there?
We moved it round the corner, and actually everyone's like, "Oh, was that an emotional day?" And actually, it really wasn't. I don't know why. Maybe it should have been, but it felt just like we were moving to a nicer store, better location, more space. So it felt good. I was happy about that.
And you were kind of doing everything.
I was doing most things, and actually, that's probably something else about me, is that I'm better when things are simple, and the business is, as we were saying before we started this, how my business has become very complicated, partly to do with all the categories we cover, but just having digital, having stores, retail is now a complicated business. But in those days, it was really simple. It was much simpler. It was pretty black and white. And it was only when we decided to, when I thought, what could be so hard? As I said, I've got one store that's doing really well. Why don't I just keep doing more of those? And that's when everything started changing.
And how did that rollout look like? Did you open the second one immediately and then
I think it was about 18 months. Was it 18
that's
months?
Pretty quick.
Yeah, it was pretty quick.
For an early stage business.
It was pretty quick. And that was, so we just rolled out another one. And then in a sort of, it's bootstrapped, so we didn't have any, it was only the money we had in our pockets, my pocket, I suppose. So it was a bit of a stuttering start. You'd open one, it would go well or not so well. But in a way, the challenges were ones that I just wasn't equipped to deal with, which was things like, you're basically having to, as you said before, I was doing pretty much everything initially. A little bit of help in the store, but really it was just me. But then once you start expanding, you have to delegate to people, and that, it turns out, is difficult.
What was so? I completely agree. But what was so difficult about it? Well,
because if you don't tell someone exactly what you want and how to do it, they will do it as best they see fit, or they won't do it, or So you're basically relying on people to have their own instincts, intuition, and sense of how to do things until you give them a full information pack of what to do. And needless to say, I had absolutely nothing to pass on to anyone, certainly nothing written down. And
so now when I walk into Oliver Bonas stores, the experience is very consistent. The store staff are super friendly, and we have a couple of people that used to work at Oliver's that they're all fab. So when did you put these systems in to allow people to thrive? And it is a people business, right? Because you're predominantly retail, physical retail.
It is.
And how did you put those in? They also seem to have a lot of autonomy at the same time, or they look very happy. How do you do that? How do you cultivate that?
Well, broadly, that all falls within the operational side of the business, which is part of the business I'm not involved in. But I do, from the sort of culture point of view, I do have a lot to say about that, and also, the whole service thing is important. But the answer is it's been a long process. There's now some brilliant people in the team, really conscientious and clever people who that's how they spend their time. And we have a learning and development team, and we have, in fact, we're just in the middle of sort of rewriting our sort of brand Bible on our mindset and our sort of best practice and the vision and why we're doing it, the meaning we give our work. So we put a lot of effort into that. But at the same time, we don't have a thick Bible of rules because we'd rather work on the basis of principles. So we keep it very slim. I mean, this thing I'm talking about, this brand Bible is very, very slim. It's about understanding the values and the principles. And at that point, we do have, obviously, ways of working and protocols and all sorts of things. But the principle is that these are the principles, this is what we're trying to achieve, and this is how we go about our business, what we believe is the right way of doing it. So as you then describe, we try as far as possible to give people autonomy within that, to deliver, because they know they've got a shared sort of agreement on what we're trying to achieve, and they know the typical ways in which we like to go about it. But it's this whole circular process, because you've got to recruit the right people, train them, and keep it consistent, and you've got to have the values have got to be aligned, and everyone's got to buy into that. And when that's all working, actually, it's I think it's much more efficient than having a big book of rules.
I completely agree. Yeah, we operate the same way. We're not perfect, but it seems to work.
But perfection, it doesn't exist anyway. So.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that you struggled with perfectionism. Can you tell me more?
Yeah, well, I realized I said that I was opening up a can of worms. I do. I mean, I call it perfectionism, but I don't know if it is, because on one hand, I'm really impatient and I can move on very quickly from things once I've sort of satisfied my sense of whatever it is about the thing, which can be frustrating for other people and myself. But I think it's like so many of these things, it's a double-edged sword. So it helps me constantly pursue that sense of how do we make it better, how do we improve, what are the things that aren't as good as they could be. And so, 31 years down the line, I still, I'll rant about a sock that I just think is, we haven't spent enough time on it and it's not right, it's not on the brand. And people are like, really, Ollie, does it matter that much? And I'm like, on the one hand, no, because it's one sock. But on the other hand, it's like, no, this represents, why would we get it wrong when we can get it right, kind of thing. And I think the upside is you're constantly driving, pushing. The downside is it kind of makes it hard just to enjoy, just to be happy and go, do you know what? 87% out of 100 is amazing. It's amazing. Whereas I'm just fretting about the 13%.
Yeah.
And for people who I work with who do this incredible job, they produce amazing things. And I'm like, well, why would we put a button there? Or why do we open at 9 when we go? I don't know. Just those little details that are constantly sort of fluctuating through my head.
Yeah. So are you trying hard not to be like that now? Now that you're aware.
So it's one thing to be aware of it. It's so deep-seated.
Yeah.
And because I said it does have some benefits. But, really it's a sort of framing issue, isn't it? You've got to just say, yes, those 2%, let's come back to those because we all want to be better and so on and so forth. But let's remind ourselves of the amazing things. So, yes, it's on my mind, but I'm not perfect.
Well, anyways, fast forward 25 years, you now have 100 stores?
No,
How many stores?
Well, actually, I just got a message before I came in saying we'd opened in Epsom. And I think that's 90.
Can you tell me about a few inflection points in the business and what the biggest challenges were during that time?
I mean, I can think of, one clear sort of moment was the credit crunch, 2008. And we could sort of see it coming because in 2007, the queues had started forming outside Northern Rock, I think. And we thought, this is not going to end well. But it actually took, in a funny way, quite a long time to play out. So in the meantime, we were running like crazy. We think our only way is to sort of grow out of this. And so we grew the business quite fast. And I think it was the right decision. But that didn't mean that in October, I think it was October 2008, when Lehman's went bust, our sales just took a real dive.
Oh, it did actually have an impact on
very
the
dramatic.
general consumers.
I mean, Connie, you're too young, you see. I don't. When did you start
No,
your business?
I'm not too young. I was actually I actually worked in investment banking.
Okay.
And right after I left, the Lehman collapse happened.
Okay. So investment banking, I mean, you must have had a perspective, but from where I was sitting and what I was reading.
I didn't think it would have had an impact on general consumers. I thought it was just the bankers that were getting fired.
Well, yeah. I mean, from where I was sort of, as I said, what I was reading, what I was seeing was like the whole financial system was under threat, and the bedrock of really how we operated as the Western capitalist societies. And I don't know whether that was a widely held feeling. I don't know, but it was very dramatic. Yeah.
And how many stores did you have at that point when Lehman collapsed?
So we weren't very big. We still weren't very big, And I'm not very good on sort of figures and things like that. But there was a sense of powerlessness. There was nothing really we could do about it. It was very much out of our hands. We tried to do some sort of promotions and things like that, and just didn't. Just no one didn't make any impact at all. So we were sort of like, well, let's just do the best we can. And Tim, who by then had joined, who's now sort of CEO, does all the operational side of the business, a friend from university, he came up with this slogan, do 100 things 1% better, which he'd borrowed from, I think, the British Lions rugby team. He's a big rugby fan. And actually it's a brilliant sort of conceptually, it just allowed everyone in the business to say, I can do my bit, whether it's saving on stationery or getting a better price on this or spending longer doing that or shorter doing that or whatever. And so it was a great rallying cry. And we came out of that, not without, quite a lot of stress, a great deal of stress, but we came through that. And that probably felt like the most existential moment.
But going back to products, you used to sell things you bought from Hong Kong, but at one point you started producing your own. When did that happen? And how did that transition happen?
On a sort of meaningful scale, it took a few years. But I mean, very early on, I was doing furniture design. I mean, I'm very, I love sculpture. I love design of all sorts. And so I thought, for me, furniture was fine. It's just a form of sculpture, really. And on my journey from home in South London to the store in Parsons Green, there's a blacksmith. I mean, it's long gone, but it was brilliant. I mean, it's just, I think about it now, and I've got a few photos of it, and it was just amazingly wonderful. Ray and Roy, the blacksmiths in their overalls, just terrific guys. And I used to go in with these sort of drawings on a piece of paper and say, can you make this? So they would make metal frames or and I would then go to and they're still there, I think Natural Wood Floor Company in Wandsworth in Smuggler's Way. And they used to get these wood floors from chateaus in France and things like this. So I would design furniture using this amazing old wood, and having then, actually, my bed up until a couple of years ago had made in this forge in Wandsworth. So I was making all sorts of things right at the beginning, but that was just not very efficient. And
because they were bespoke and one-offs.
It wasn't they were bespoke, but they could be bespoke. And again, it's just lots of work. And actually, we used to do mirror frames. That was a big part of our business for quite a long time, using this beautiful old oak. And it was all bespoke. And I even tried writing, God, it's all coming back to me now. I haven't tried writing some sort of basic computer program to work out people putting the measurements and what would the price be. And I don't know. I'm not a computer programmer, that's for sure. And so there was quite a lot of that at the very beginning. But in when it really sort of got hold, I'm trying to think what year it was. It was probably mid-2000s. So I went to Basel to a jewellery fair, and I found this Thai silver jewelry supplier. And at that point, that's when we started doing, so jewelry was really the first main area we started doing. And you might call it sort of product development. So we'd see their range and then we'd say, yeah, can we have that? But can we have it twice as long? Can we have it with pearls? Could we have it with da da da? So we did a lot of that. And they're still a supplier 25 years later or something.
That's amazing.
Yeah, no, they're fantastic. So jewelry was really the starting point. I'd be hard pressed to sort of give you a sort of chronology of the various different categories and how they went. But probably more the sort of home and gift product initially, the simpler stuff, not like electricals and things. But because
that's what I remember Oliver Bonas.
Yes,
the homeware and gifting.
Yeah, and that's probably fair. I remember the fashion journey a bit more, and it started with we got one designer in, and we were making dresses.
Yeah, I remember
skirts.
we were talking about your fashion category. It's a huge category, which I was very surprised about. Can you tell me more about your fashion category? Like what percentage of the business is, how it evolved?
I really have developed an amazing respect for people in the fashion business. It's unbelievably hard. It's much the hardest area of the business. It's got the most jeopardy. You have to get so many things right at the same time.
What's the most difficult bit? Keeping up with the trend and being relevant, or is it the sizing?
The sizing and things like that, they're absolutely critical, and the fit, but they're sort of manageable. I mean, there are more parameters around it, but getting the design and the product and the trend, pitching it right, is the sort of bit that's more amorphous and
it's more art than science.
Yeah.
So you're relying on like a really good team.
That's right, and because it's not really my central area of expertise, you might say. Definitely say it's harder for me to guide the team really. So
It sounds like they're doing an amazing job.
Yes, no, I mean, we've got this incredible team. I think we've got 11 designers now. And as I said, it's been very successful. Obviously I know you've got this amazing jewelry business, but jewelry is a really important part of our business. Accessories is really important and growing. But clothing is, the biggest category we do. But as I said, it's got the most challenges around it. And I can see sometimes you see a fashion brand just doing unbelievably well, but often it's hard for them to sustain that.
Yeah.
Because there's almost like a law that the better you do, the harder it is to sustain because you become popular so widely. We not by design, but we do take a more sort of steady approach. We're not trying to be the flavor of the month. We just want to focus on doing brilliant product that people love, but not trying to become too narrow and what we do and becomes too much flavor of the month of one particular style.
Yeah.
I think we'd rather be sort of consistent over time.
Yeah. That's probably a better business model.
It's a different business model. It's what we do.
So you were very young, going back to the early days again, and you presumably had to hire experts in different functions. How did you go about that? Because you presumably were managing people that were older and more experienced than you are.
Well, it was kind of there's a bit to unpack in that because, it was a sort of Darwinian recruitment process where I'm not very easy to work with. And I've got my very, characteristics which make me not a very good manager, actually. So people...
What are those characteristics?
Well, I'm impatient and I'm not sort of diligent and see things through to the end. And I'm a bit disorganized, as you well know. For those listening or watching, Connie and I's first meeting, I was half an hour late to, and she was about to leave. And and I still am a bit baffled as to how because actually I'm so much better. So I felt so bad about that. And I hate doing that to people, but I used to do that quite a lot. So, yeah, no, I'm not, and I'm not a good man. You know, a manager is someone you really got to. It's a very specific skill, thinking about someone else, their role, what works for them, what's important to them, how they can be guided and taught rather than just like, oh, well, that's not good. You know, I recognize that I don't have a lot of those management skills. So when I sort of talk about Darwinian, it's like the people who actually like, do you know what? I don't need that. I don't need that style of management. I need someone just to sort of point me in the right direction, or just to give me freedom, but to give me a vision, or whatever it is. But actually, you know, so I've got people who I work well with, but I'm conscious that there's a lot of people who I wouldn't enjoy working with me. So that early period was you know.
But I think that's the nature of working closely with the founder. I think they need to be mini entrepreneurs themselves, because we can't even though we're not experts in anything, right? In a way, as well.
That's right. So you talked about experts and things. So so over time, the people who are doing the roles that you can't do and they're doing them well, you really lean on them and they stay. And they're the kind of person who's like, actually, I enjoy this style.
Yeah, the freedom.
And I like working for someone like who has those characteristics because they have upsides. Largely it was people were managing themselves. So I wasn't really managing them. And in terms of the sort of the age aspect, I don't really remember that being an issue one way or the other. I don't know how many were older than me, but we didn't have these lots of sort of, I wasn't recruiting industry sages who've got lots of experience, and we didn't do that. That wasn't how we operated. I mean, very sort of we built everything up.
Self-selected.
Yeah. And and for a long time, I don't know if you call it imposter syndrome, but I'd meet people in the industry, the retail industry, and they all talked about stuff. I didn't really know what they were talking about. And I just sort of thought, oh God, they just know things I don't. And I'm just winging it, and who knows, and they all know things, the magic sort of secrets. But I sort of come to the viewpoint that actually it's almost good to have your own viewpoint and not know what the industry standard is, because now I have to, when I was talking about our brand Bible and things like that, I was, one of the things I've written down is one of our mindsets is challenge orthodoxy, because it's very easy to say, well, this is how this works and everyone does it this way. And it's like, well, there's a reason they do that way. And it might be a good reason, or it might be a good reason to create a point of difference, that we do something different. And because we just did whatever we thought was the right thing, it's not necessarily without its pain points. But it does mean you are yourself and you create something that is, genuinely, authentically.
Yeah, I think that's the right way.
Thank you. Now, 31 years later, at last,
I wish you'd
told me that. Like, just do your thing. That's the way to go.
I think common sense is underrated. And people think there's best practices.
Yes.
But a lot of the times, best practices could be best practice for that business, but it doesn't work for us.
Well, that's completely where I've got to. But I think, that's the other thing about being a founder of a business, is the degree to which your conviction, you're able to sort of hold on to that. And I mean, obviously there's obviously a question mark over whether you're right to hold on to your convictions of how you want to do things. But, you try and balance what other people are saying, but your intuition, and navigate through that.
Yeah. How do you do that? Because I think that's very important. Get feedback, but then filter that and see what's right, what's wrong, and then make it your own.
That's sort of why I'm rewriting the brand Bible at the moment, is because I realized coming out of COVID, I suddenly sort of looked up and realized that quite a few parts of the business were just operating independently because there was a vacuum. We hadn't really given them enough guidance. So you had these really, amazing people doing kind of their own thing, and it was slightly different, and actually we'd lost a little bit of alignment, and the brand actually wasn't really speaking very coherently. So that led me to sort of look again at all the fundamentals of how we communicate internally, and how it should all join up, and what it means, and what is the brand meant to look like. So trying to, we've now got a lot of people, and that was the other thing, suddenly we had a big marketing team and we hadn't really had before. Everything was very much, we were all in the room and we all spoke to each other and there was just an understanding. And once you lose that, partly physically because people are in different rooms and partly just through the volume of people, you realize that regardless of what you think, decisions are being made. And sometimes they're being made by people who've only just joined the company in what might be regarded as a sort of junior position. But they're actually making brand decisions without sort of meaning to or realizing it. It's no one's fault. But and you're like, oh my God, how, what? No. But then you realize, well, hang on, that's my responsibility. Is to make sure that that everyone understands it, insofar as it's possible to understand it. Because I find it very hard to articulate something that to me is just intuitive, and I'm like, well, I don't know.
I think it's hard, but everyone kind of has a personal take on it as well. And we're kind of going through a similar journey where, like, I think everyone kind of understands the brand. There's an unspoken rule, but then I can see it like kind of being diluted as people come in. I mean, like very talented people, but because it's not super crystal clear, it just gets diluted down the line a little bit as well.
Yes. So on the one hand, I'm trying to keep it as tight as possible, but on the other hand, the forces are pulling it apart. Us apart in terms of,
I might pick your brains a bit later.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, we can. Yeah, definitely. It'll be good for me because I haven't solved it. But where it conflicts, I think I try and just take a temperature of the room, so to speak, and go, well, look, if I'm massively on my own here, then fine, I'll concede, and I won't, begrudge it. It's like, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
And I suppose in reverse, if I feel strongly enough about something, I'll say, look, I request that you just fall in behind me on this particular thing and give it your best. So it's like a sort of an agree to disagree, but agree to just go with the decision.
Go with it. Yeah.
I haven't put it in quite those stark terms, but I think it was actually that was something. I've been reading Jeff Bezos's a book about some of his collected writings or something, and I must say I was quite surprised that I would find him a person to learn things from, which might sound, I don't know if that sounds arrogant, or it's not, because obviously he's an extraordinary man, but it hadn't quite occurred to me how extraordinary and how sort of focused he is and how thoughtful he is. But that was one of his principles that I'd been operating sort of slightly unconsciously, which is wherever we go, we've got to make a decision, and we've got to all then do our best to make it work, with the knowledge that probably one of us is possibly, wrong, perhaps, even if it's not as stark as that. But that's fine. I want to create an environment where we can be wrong, because it's really important that we take risks, and that we can acknowledge it. There's this one bedspread we designed, and the team was just massively split on it. From like, this is just no way, and from the other people like, this is the best, it's going to be brilliant. And I was very much in the I was in the camp of, it's got the potential to be brilliant, we've got to give it a go. You can see I'm already backtracking, pretending I didn't really think it was going to be amazing, because it turned out to not be amazing at all. And so, but we've got to then be able to sit there across the table from each other and go, yeah, you called that one right, but we made a decision for the right reasons, and we're going to do that again. And it might be we go with your decision next time. So we try and, far as possible, to depersonalize these things. We, just an agreement that we're going to make decisions that we don't all agree with. But as I said, I try and take the temperature in the room and see if I'm like completely on my own, and the degree to which my sense of conviction, what degree I am sort of convinced of something, and then but that's the other thing is, we like certainty, we like black and white, and we like to sort of, but increasingly the way I see things is it just isn't like that, and you have to embrace a certain degree of sort of paradox and greyness. Otherwise, you could slightly go mad. So that's how I deal with it.
What's been your biggest personal challenge so far?
apart from that, as I said, that transition from one store to sort of from one store, I consider it to be like one store to a business. That was how I see the transition. Apart from that, I would say it's this idea of my role in the business, and to what degree. I'm a product person. That's where I started. I love design, and actually going back to the original thing, the other aspect, I was, in the sort of 80s, there was quite a sort of trend for quite sort of designy, particularly sort of Italian style stores, which were very cool, but very expensive. And I couldn't afford them. And I sort of thought, well, design doesn't need, that's a nice vase.
Well,
or
what's
whatever.
an Italian style store?
Well, there were a lot of Italian designs at the time. No, I don't really mean that. I mean, if you think about some of the designs at the time, Alessi.
Oh, okay. Got it.
They were sort of kind of boutique-y style, selling sort of expensive corkscrews and things like that. And I was like, well, the Conne Nam shop was a big thing back in those days. And so I'd go in there and be like, oh, it's beautiful or whatever. But I sort of felt some of these things are lovely, but they needn't be expensive. It's perfectly possible to design something beautiful that doesn't have to be expensive. So that was kind of that's one of my sort of foundational things that I probably don't really talk about that much. So I'm a product person, and I'm a design person, and a brand sort of person, but we've got all these designers in whose job it is to design product. But I'm not a designer, so I couldn't design it anyway. But I know what I like.
Yeah.
And I'm never, it's a perfection thing. It's never going to be. There isn't a sort of perfect thing. So you might say the personal challenge for me is to just make sure I'm enjoying it. And the times I least enjoy it is when I'm not gelling with the teams. I find that very, very difficult. Because I'm totally reliant on them, but it's my job to communicate, and I'll say everything ultimately comes back to me to do a better job of whatever it is that I need to do. So that's the thing I sort of battle with. It's not, for me, it's not a sort of widgets business. It's not a finance business. It's really personal to me.
Yeah, same as me. for all founders, it's like super personal.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That was so fun, Olly.
Well, Connie, thanks very much.
Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to follow the podcast wherever you're listening or watching. You can follow me at Conne Nam, Astrid and Miyu at Astrid and Miyu, and the Unboxed Instagram page at unboxed_founder confidential. See you next week.